One of the other places to really get actually for jackets and all that stuff. You live in where? Oh, so it's in like the shopping
Okay, so he has it all. He needs to just you accept it. Where'd you guys you used to have more like 4 to 6 days. You want to lay it flat or I'm very your husband probably would be happy about it. It's just the two of us, and John and Benita.
Well, this is one here, this is North Hills over here. And then we've got complaints about that. This is right behind the hospital.
7 years.
Here's Grace, actually Grace. Yeah, they really really extensive erosion in that neighborhood. This is the area that's going to go.
Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the West Goshen Township Board of Supervisors meeting for Tuesday, May the 3rd. If you would please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be aware this meeting is being live streamed on the Township YouTube channel, and also the meeting may be audio or video recorded by people present in the room. The first item on the agenda tonight is continued discussion regarding a proposed redevelopment of the current Quality Inn and Suite site at 943 South High Street. So I'll just kind of introduce the subject and provide the background. So this evening the board is continuing the discussion on the proposed redevelopment of the current Quality Inn and Suites property at 943 South High Street. The presentation was given at the April 5th board meeting by the potential developer, Mr. Tarantini, who's with us tonight, assisted by Mr. Meitzler from TPD Inc. for possible construction of a 167-unit apartment building and a self-storage facility. This property is currently in the C3 commercial zoning district, which does not permit these proposed uses by right, through special exception, or by conditional use. Several issues were discussed on April 5th by the board and the public that were in attendance, including access to the site, traffic concerns, particularly cut-through traffic in the surrounding neighborhood and the increased volume as compared to the current hotel operation. A particular concern was increased traffic volume on the congestion and safety of traffic exiting Stanton Avenue to turn right onto Route 202 North. And third, the ongoing quality of life concerns due to opportunistic criminal activity at the hotel property. This evening, the board will deliberate if consideration should be given to amending the zoning of the property that may permit the proposed redevelopment of the site. There are several possible options for rezoning that have been outlined in the agenda materials. As a reminder, if the board determines that the existing zoning should not be amended, the site could potentially be redeveloped for other by right uses for the C3 commercial zoning district, including retail, personal service establishment, office building, medical clinic or lab, wholesale, sales, storage or distribution. There's also potential that the property could be sold and rehabilitated as another hotel in the future, as it is a grandfathered existing non-conforming use. Please note, however, that there is no other redevelopment proposal in consideration at this time. So at this point, I ask the board to share their opinions on whether or not to further consider the developer's request to rezone the property for an apartment complex and self-storage facility. So is there anyone on the board who would like to kick the conversation off?
Well, I guess I'll start off. I still have those concerns that were raised at the last meeting, namely the traffic.
John, would you mind using your microphone, please? Thanks.
I just want to reiterate some of the concerns that were expressed at the last board meeting, namely the ones concerning traffic. That corridor right there along the 202, 322 is heavy volume every day, and this is just going to add to it. And also the access from the site. There's only one means of access into the proposed development as it is now, but we now have a requirement in our books that for any development of 25 units should have at least 2 accesses to streets. So those 2 issues there I don't see being resolved. The other concern I have is this, is the number, and I have to question this, the rezoning of the property to an I2R light industrial district. Would that also mean that the multiple district or multiple purpose district, which allows I2 uses, be allowed as well? If that's the case, then the mobile home park, for which we had a lot of discussion about and a lot of concern about last year, would then be open to apartment development. So that's a concern I have as well.
Thank you, John. Other board members, thoughts? Anybody else want to weigh in?
Well, I share your concerns, John. Like I've said before, I feel like this is an interesting situation because I do want to see the site be redeveloped out of what it currently is, especially given all the crime that we're seeing there. On the other hand, there's the traffic problem. And we had some residents here at the last meeting talking about their concerns around that. It's a tough call for me.
Okay. Tina or Robin?
I kind of agree with John and Ashley. It's a tough decision. I basically want to do what the residents want, people. And I'm hearing, the concerns with the police activity that has to go over there. It's been going on. Although the last meeting they didn't mention any of that at all. It's just traffic. And I know if I was living in that neighborhood, I'd be concerned. foot traffic and children and families, and I wouldn't appreciate it either. So it's a tough call. I do have concerns about it.
Yeah, I first think thank you. I think for most of the conversation, I do appreciate Mr. Santina for bringing that to us. But I think that we do have a concern, which is never going to end unless things change significantly for them to have egress safely.
Okay, so we've all had about a month to kind of stew this over, if not longer, probably a year in total, right, since it was first came up as an idea. So obviously I've got my own thoughts on it. I just thought I'd share those with you now. So in general, I am supportive of new residential construction. There is a severe nationwide housing shortage brought on by sluggish construction since the 2006-2008 housing bubble. Since 2012, there have been approximately 12 million new households formed in the U.S., but only 7 million new residences built, a gap of 5 million units nationwide. Housing affordability has got even worse, with home ownership increasingly out of reach for many people, especially for younger households. And rental rates have also increased dramatically in the last few years. New residential construction is essential to address this problem. However, having said that, in any new location for new residential construction must be able to handle the scale of development proposed. In my opinion, the lack of a second meaningful access to the property and the serious inadequacy of the intersection of Stanton Avenue and Route 202 to safely handle a significant increase in traffic volume is such that I don't support rezoning for development of this scale of apartment units. While I understand the possible redevelopment for other by-right uses or reversion to a more successful hotel operation could significantly increase traffic volumes compared to what exists today, that is not the issue in front of the board this evening. So I'm opposed to the request to change the existing zoning, even though we don't know what the future will hold for this site. That's my opinion. So I think we've heard from all the board. Seems like the consensus is not to move forward with rezoning to the property. Is that correct?
That's my yes, not to move forward.
I do want to thank Mr. Tarantini. He has worked hard to come up with a proposed redevelopment that might be acceptable to the board. He's looked at the economics of it. He's explored the by-right uses. He has tried to secure a second access to this property in terms of it being a better proposal for redevelopment, although that was unsuccessful. So we do appreciate your efforts. Very good. So is there anyone who would like to make a public comment at this point? Doug?
Good evening, everyone. Doug White, West Goshen Township, Woodview Lane. I'm going to say something. I don't want to violate the confidence of anybody, but there is interest in the purchase of that property to keep it as a hotel. I'm not allowed to say who or what stage it's at, but when the parties are ready, I can help facilitate that.
Thank you. Thank you. Would anybody else like to make a comment about this situation? Yes, ma'am.
First of all, thank you. It's really nice to hear that everyone is in agreement that the traffic and everything is just not going to be something that's going to be feasible for my family, for the Weldons that are right behind us and their 3 kids. I did want to ask though, with this not moving forward right now, is this going to come up again? Are we, we sat here last year and did this, and now we're here again. So what is the viability of this coming up again and us going through this process again?
Well, I mean, clearly the site is struggling to be an economically viable business as a hotel. We've heard that maybe someone else is interested in purchasing it and continuing to use that grandfathered use. So again, it's not a by right use, but it's an existing use that's in place. And as I pointed out in my comments earlier about the backstory of this, there are other redevelopments that are allowed by right for that commercial zoning that exists today. That if this proposal doesn't move forward, another developer could come forward with a completely different proposal that may not include rezoning, in which case the board would be in a different position in terms of having to understand what the request is, and a by right use means that they would presumably be able to move forward with it despite, what you may perceive as objections to increased traffic, etc.
I'm just speaking specifically to like a residential complex and what that could look like if it's not rezoned.
This board has decided that rezoning for residential is not appropriate, so at this point, unless this board changes that would not be moving forward.
Excellent, thank you.
Could we, can I just interject? What could be allowed as the way it's currently zoned as a C3 commercial district would be retail, personal service establishment, an office building, a laboratory facility or a medical clinic, a wholesale sales, storage or distribution, a forestry, a learning center. So those are the kind of uses that are currently allowed in that district as it is currently zoned.
And that's what our understanding was as well. We were just primarily talking about an apartment complex with lots of residents.
Okay. Thank you.
Excuse me, can I get your name for the record?
Sure. It's Kaylee Leota.
And resident of Westtown Township on Stanton Avenue.
Can you spell your last name?
Leocha.
Thank you.
Sure.
Someone else would like to make a comment? Margie?
Hi, good evening, Margie Sword. First of all, I just wanted to commend staff for the work they did on this as far as just to look at meeting documents and have a thorough memorandum to the Board of Supervisors and to the public is something that the public and the board hasn't had that luxury for many years. So kudos to staff on that. And also, in all the years I've been coming to these meetings, I think this is the first time I've ever heard no on a rezoning. And I'm glad to see you put a lot of thought into it, but it's not that difficult, hopefully, to say no. And I'm glad you did. So just thanks for that.
Thank you for your comment, Margie. Anyone else would like to make a comment? Very good. Well, thank you very much for that topic. We're going to move on to the next agenda item. Oh, Sam, you want to make a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank the board for the time they've dedicated. Nothing to add regarding the development, but certainly there's been a lot of discussions over the last year to try to come up with a proposal, and you've dedicated a lot of time and thought to it on behalf of the township and the residents. So I didn't get a chance to do that last meeting and say proper thanks. I want to do that tonight.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. So we're going to move on the agenda then to agenda item number 4, which is discussion regarding a proposal from Carroll Engineering Corporation regarding a proposed stormwater feasibility study for certain neighborhoods in West Goshen Township. So I'll just give a little background on this. At our January the 18th meeting, residents from North Hills asked the township for a better understanding of what can be done to improve stormwater management issues in their development. The board broadened the discussion to consider the situation in older township neighborhoods that were constructed decades ago with either very limited or severely inadequate stormwater systems. The board requested that our consulting engineer, Carroll Engineering, develop a proposal to examine the feasibility of providing stormwater infrastructure improvements to those areas of the township. The proposal has now been received and outlines costs for 16 areas of interest that have been identified as containing no or inadequate stormwater infrastructure. So the board discussion this evening is to review the information and determine what next steps to take. Unfortunately, Mr. Craig, our engineer, is not available for this meeting. He was on vacation. So we may end up with just a preliminary discussion tonight, but we'll see where we get to. Chris, do you want to add anything to the intro?
No, Mr. Chairman. I had Carroll Engineering prepare the proposal so that the board could determine if the board decides to move forward with the proposal. I had to prepare it in such a way that you could look at specific areas individually and the costs associated with those specific areas, or a lump sum cost as well. And let me just connect to the system, and I'll be able to project the map up on the screen. So as noted, we've looked at, Mr. Craig looked and Carroll Engineering looked at 16 project areas, and they're identified in red on this map. The project areas represent approximately 20% of the acreage in the township overall. And again, infrastructure in a way that the board could choose specific project areas to focus on, so you can budget those on a year-by-year basis.
Chris, what is number one? It's different in terms of how it's set up on the map. It's not delineated in red, it's just a circle.
I don't know the exact location, but it might just be very small, so I can't really speak to what exactly it is.
Okay, so this is 20% area of the total township that would need to be linear stormwater.
Correct.
Okay.
Now, it's important to note on the proposal that this doesn't include the generation of plans. This would just be an analysis of what would be needed.
And a cost estimate moving forward, right?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sean, your question, number one's Oak Hill, Pennsylvania, New York, Delaware.
What is it?
Oak Hill.
Oh, okay.
So if you look at the scope of work on page 3, I was going to ask Rick, if you could kind of help me understand what some of these would actually mean in terms of output. So it talks about it talks about a report discussing the feasibility. The report will include description of overall drainage patterns, etc. And I was curious as to whether this means that we expect to see a report that would show where new stormwater mains would be installed. There's also mention about the fact that, obviously to improve stormwater, you need this retention, but they recognize that it's going to be highly unlikely to find areas sufficiently large enough to be utilized for that. So in the absence of that, how does it work with having a stormwater main? So really kind of need Rick's civil engineering support to get a little further to what we actually get and spending on.
I would agree. I would recommend that the board, this is just a first glance at what the overall cost would be. My recommendation to the board would be to table this for the time being. We can take any questions back to Mr. Craig when he returns for more detailed information. And I think it would also be beneficial to look at these 16 areas of study and have Rick and Chris work together to kind of prioritize them. I think if the board does wish to move forward with this proposal, prioritizing them would be beneficial and would help us from the budgeting standpoint.
Yeah, there is a cost savings of about $25,000 if we do all 16 together versus individually. So
This is just a study.
Yeah,
Exactly.
correct.
I mean, I got to say, when we first talked about this, when the North Hills neighborhood came, it was more along the lines of what are the top 4 or 5, so priority, if you like, that we might want to look at. And I think, I don't know if we threw a number out or not, I can't recall. It certainly is in the minutes, I don't think. Kind of in my mind, it's in that 20 to 25,000 to look at, 3 or 4 of these top locations. 60,000. 6 locations, okay. So it was a smaller kind of set. It wasn't 20% of the township as proposed, which is fine. I mean, obviously there's a rationale for this, and Rick can explain why, he picked all these areas, etc. And it's obviously, as you described, set up so you can pick and choose which one you want to focus on. I do think the board maybe tonight could have a little conversation around, assuming that we do end up with Rick explaining what the output look like, and top 4, 5, or 6, in terms of priority, what would that mean then in terms of the next step? Are we thinking of just picking one? Would we say we'll do several? What criteria will we use to describe whose neighborhood gets a look-see and whose doesn't? And the other implication to me is, it's $130,000 just to figure out what we needed in 16 areas. I mean, if the output is, hey, you need stormwater drains on half a dozen roads, and a stormwater basin, and redo this, and easements here, there, and everywhere, we're talking each one of these areas could lead to multi-million-dollar projects. And I have to question whether the intention of the board is to spend money on scoping things, knowing that the output from it would be something that is hard to see how the township could move forward on rectifying decades-old problems in 27 of the township as a public expense. So I think we do need to have that conversation, if not tonight, when it goes back.
And we do, and I can't see spending that much money for 16 areas. I don't know which priority we want to do first. And second of all, we're spending the money on the studies. We're not going to get to all 16 for several years total. So
It will be
evaluate-
piecemeal.
Yeah, if you evaluate it now, things could change when you actually start to do the work, which could be a couple of years down the road. But if you pick like 4 areas, priority areas that's manageable that you can work on now, and just do the study on those now, and then spend the money later for the other areas. I think it's too much to take on, and too many things are going to change by the time you get to do the work.
Yeah, I'm not sure things will change. I mean, these areas are all the neighborhoods, they're stable, you know, fixed stormwater, they will Oh, the price, yeah. That will change. But in terms of what the solution is, you know, is it a $1 million fix or is it a $3 million fix? This study is going to tell you that in terms of at least a ballpark in today's costs. And if you add up that to 16, you end up with a sum of money that's, to my mind, beyond what we can manage in the township. So,
Exactly. So why spend the money to do it if you can't help it?
yeah. But on the other hand, I'm going to play devil's advocate. So folks are saying, well, what is it that we could do? You know, is there some things we could do or move forward with, either as a homeowners association or individuals or whatever else? So without a test, look at something to say this is what we could produce and help people understand the magnitude of what would be needed. It's difficult to kind of say, here's how you could help move forward. But yeah, we need Rick and we need Chris here as well to talk it through.
Right. I think if we have it at the next meeting, that would help me.
Yeah, I would just ask for Rick, for the next meeting, if he can give us the criteria that he used to come up with these 16 locations. And also a description of what those locations are, so we have a better handle on what we're talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, there's other factors too that could be taken into consideration too. For example, some of these areas here, there may be homeowner associations associated with that particular neighborhood. That may be a willing partner or an able partner in pursuing a stormwater solution. So that may be another criteria we may want to consider as a board as we move forward in doing a feasibility study and deciding on doing any work as a result of that. So there may be other factors to consider.
And cost to the HOA and the local future cost too. To a portion of it. Yeah. Right.
Okay, any other comments from the board?
Well, just one last comment. This is a heck of a thing to add to our plate here, but the climate warming and the effect it's having on our environment and so forth, it's something we're going to have to deal with. And it's becoming more and more of an issue, more and more of a problem. The 100-year storms are happening more frequently. The 500-year storms are happening more frequently. And it's going to be something we're going to have to deal with and adapt to. We have to figure out the best way forward to do that.
Okay. Any other comments? Any comments from the public? So,
Yeah, hi, Steve Crump. I live on Owen Road, North Hill Development, and I've been dealing with this problem since I moved in here 40 years ago. It's just gotten continually worse. When my backyard gets flooded from the neighbors up the hill behind me, my front yard is flooded from the neighbors up the street. Remember, we had more than a couple inches of rain. And my feeling on this is that the township needs to start addressing these issues. The roads get paved, they're great, but the roads grounds keeps getting higher. So the water doesn't run down the street anymore, it runs down the front yards. That's been a problem. But I think you need to start taking these projects off one at a time and start to make some improvements. It's not going to go away, it's not going to get better. And I had to deal with it. I put that $10,000 and put a French drain on the basement, 2 sump pumps. So, it's either the residents get the burden or the township starts to kind of deal with it. Okay.
thank you, Steve. Any other comments? Doug?
Doug White, West Goshen Township. Is there a way, short of doing this feasibility study where we'd have to spend money, if Dave Woodward and Mark Bertolami and Rick can go to these areas and of the township and determine if the problem is a street problem or it's a lot problem in terms of how the lot is graded, and if maybe recommendations can be done or suggestions to the residents about what they can do on their own properties to help lessen the problem. Thank you.
Thanks, Doug. Any other comments? Margie, do you want to make a comment?
I was just going to say, I think it all has to be done together. It's going to have to be like an overarching approach between looking at the township and private property owners. I don't think you can just have our public works staff and Rick go out there and determine it.
I agree. We do need a professional engineer to look at the entirety of the system and be able to have the resource to put on it and come up with, an engineer's professional view as to what the solution could best look like. Margie, you want to make a comment?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I thought focusing on the top 4 problem areas would be the route that I would like to see, only because back in 2015, when I was first invited to be on the Stormwater Committee, the North Hills development was on the plans to be addressed. So here we are 7 years later, and nothing's been addressed at North Hills. And I just remember Mr. Craig saying, originally, many years ago, all the front yards had a drainage swale in there. And then over years and over time, people didn't like mowing, they didn't like the grass, whatever, so they filled in those drainage swales. So, it seems like there might, I don't want to say be an easy fix, but if that will help some of the residents in that neighborhood, we need to stop talking about it and just do something. To me, when I saw that map, I'm like, holy, now what? And I'm interested to know, like Mr. Craig had stated in the past, that a lot of these neighborhoods simply don't have storm drains. And so are some of these just neighborhoods that don't have storm drains, and we're looking at putting storm drains in?
Basically, I think most of those neighbors, I don't want to say on the record,
Sure.
but Mr. Craig said, basically, I think all those areas probably don't have storm drains. They have culverts under roads, but the water flows from one private property to another private property. There is no retention basin. Certainly is what I witnessed in North Hills when we went and looked at that in November last year, that the flow of the water to the pond or lake, whatever it's called, is through people's yards. It was designed that way when it was built. So whether it's got worse because of the intensity of storms, coupled with people filling in swales that have directed it slightly differently, so that now there's a much bigger flow in certain areas, I don't know. That's why we need an engineer to look at it and say, swales would take care of 20% of the problem, but guess what? You're back still to the original design, which with the day-to-day storms, the frequency would represent this kind of problem. And if there is a solution or not, because
sometimes
if there may not be if you put a main under the road, where's it going to come out at? It has to come out somewhere. So.
And I feel comfortable having an engineering firm make the decision about which property or which neighborhoods, are the ones in most need of improvements. And I think that if they come up with a list, I'd be comfortable in then saying, these are the ones that we need to focus on, and I'd be comfortable focusing on those. And North Hills is number one, and that's what we do. Right?
Yeah. Well, actually, you made a passionate case for making sure we did look at a broader area when we first discussed this. You said just because North Hills was here doesn't mean there aren't other areas in the township that experience extreme difficulties when we have these intense storms. So we will, if we are going to proceed with some kind of study, whether it's only 1 or 2, we do need a process, and if that's the external consulting engineer having that recommendation, that hopefully will be moving forward. Any other comments? Yes, sir.
Yes, hi, Mark Profeta, Richmond Road. I'm just curious, it brought up a question, and I thought, the paving from Aqua going through development of Meriwether Farm and such, when they're having repaving coming through right now, and they're doing, you're they don't take up the old road, right? They're just putting a crown over top of.
No, we mill an inch and a half, put an inch and a half back.
Okay, because my driveway, I think it's the second time, Richmond at least, and I'm sure that others are getting repaved. So it's bringing it up a little further each time. And I think right now, my house level, if I were to put a driveway out to it, right now it drains away. So I'm just now all of a sudden concerned that if I put a driveway in, it's not going to tip back to my house. It's not
Our normal paving procedures, we mill an inch and a half, we put an inch and a half back.
Okay. So we're not going to change the height.
You're not going to change the height.
Okay, I don't think there's not much more left to go, like we're right there.
I may disagree with you, but I've been here for a long time, and the road is several inches higher than it was when I moved in. And maybe
Definitely
they're
higher
using
this
more.
time, yeah.
I don't know, but there's a crown to the road, a lot of water comes off the road into the.
Well, that's how a road is designed. The road is designed with a 2% grade.
Right.
The road is not designed to carry the water, it's designed to shed the water into the grass. So without stormwater controls, it goes into the lawns.
As long as we don't have any, I don't have to worry about height going further than where it is. That's great.
Sir, could I get the spelling of your last name for the record?
P as in Paul, E-R, F as in Frank, E-T-T-O.
Thank you.
So Chris, I'm hearing the board would like to have this on the agenda again and bring this back. So probably the June meeting, I guess, we're going to talk about whether there's another meeting in May or not.
And so what we're looking for from Mr. Craig is prioritization of the 16 areas and what the resulting document would look like from Carroll Engineering, and a description of location and how he arrived at those areas.
I mean, we could talk about the output when he's in attendance, so the board's not here. We can have a back and forth conversation with him about it. So he doesn't have to do any work on that, just needs to understand with Carol what kind of quality of information and the extent that it would be available.
I'd also like to have a description of the areas as opposed to numbers.
Yeah,
Just
the
clarifying.
description of the locations,
Okay.
the 16 areas.
And the criteria you use for the 16 locations.
Okay.
That too.
So and I had how he arrived at the study areas.
Same.
Very good. So move on to agenda. Oh, sorry, Mike, you on?
Yeah, one quick question. I asked this a couple of years ago, and I forget what the answer was. Do we ever just reseal some roads and streets?
That's not approved PennDOT procedure. You can chip seal, but people aren't going to be real happy with that.
So move on to agenda item number 5, which is discussion regarding a proposed ordinance of West Goshen Township to recoup certain fees associated with the housing of stray animals. And I believe, Kristen, you have brought this to the attention of the board.
Yeah, I think there was one of the questions on the bills to be paid, a question about the SPCA bill. And just sitting in many municipalities complaining about the SPCA bills, I know that some of my municipal clients have had separate meetings with representatives of the SPCA and gone over their bills and found in many instances they were being incorrectly billed and overbilled. But one of the strategies that actually my colleague Kim Benzie did in West Town was come up with an ordinance where the SPCA charges the township, because your contract, if an animal is picked up in West Goshen and kept at the SPCA, you're charged fees. Right. Even if the owner comes and recoups the animal, you're charged the fees. Exactly. So this is one mechanism for you to, if you incur costs on your SPCA bill for a resident whose dog or other animal was brought to the SPCA, you could then bill them. Now, this isn't going to be a catch-all, win-all everything, because there's still an administrative cost for you to try to go after that fee. Depending on how significant your costs are, does it make sense? I mean, there has to be some sort of analysis on that. But this is really meant to be that if you're being charged by the SPCA for somebody's animal being taken there, and again, if you can identify the owner of that animal, you could then send them a bill. Some municipalities do it without even an ordinance in place. And I don't know how successful they are. If the owner looks at it and says, throws it away, this gives you the enforcement power that if they do that, throw the bill away and don't pay it, you can then cite them and collect fines. So It's just one way, again, I think, to really have somebody, maybe Christine, analyze how much you're paying, how much those charges are, but I think the first place to start too is to really have somebody looking at those bills to make sure you're being properly billed per the contract.
Yeah, I like that. I like this ordinance too. That the other township had was the West,
Yeah, they're adopting this next week.
Yeah.
This came from a model from West County, has one in place. And I did, when Kim was doing the research for the West County ordinance, there are other, not just Chester County municipalities, but there are municipalities across the Commonwealth that have similar concepts.
I would like to look into that, inquire with the SBCA to look at the bills. And also, I like this one. One area that I didn't like that was in here is under seizure and detention, 5.3 D. I think the residents of the township should engage in active efforts to trap, not feed, but to trap feral cats and various things, because I think that helps also with the population.
Yeah, I think the problem here is that when they do that and then bring them to the SPCA, you're getting charged. So if somebody traps them, they bring them to the SPCA, now this becomes your problem to have to deal with for the cost.
Because we can't, if someone, they're not technically the owner, so if someone is like feeding and trapping a feral cat and bring it to the SPCA for treatment, we really can't go after that person for the housing fee because they're not the owner. So it's correct.
You would be charged a fee.
We would be charged.
Yeah, under your contract with the SPCA, you're charged fees for those animals.
Well, the only thing is, if you look at it from a practical standpoint, is that the SPCA doesn't catch them, they're still going to run the strays. I see it increases our costs, but it also captures.
But if they're just running stray and they're not being taken to the SPCA, you're not being charged for it.
I'm just thinking the right thing to do, though.
Yeah, no.
Aside from a cost standpoint,
sure.
It's helping capture animals to bring them back.
Do you really trust people to capture them, like, professionally, though?
Yes, my colleague does all the time.
Do we have an animal protection officer?
Really?
That's
Animals.
The SPCA.
That's the SPCA.
Yeah, you designate the SPCA.
Who is is it the SPCA?
Yeah, yeah.
We designate, under our contract, they're
They're
designated.
designated.
I would expect, if you have a feral cat problem, surely the animal protection services officer could go get the animal, right? Isn't that the best way to do it? Versus so it's done properly?
They can't be there all the time.
Well, how many feral cats are roaming
A
around?
lot. Around our offices, a lot. And the girl in there captures them, she spades them, and then tries to get home. She's been doing this for
So just think of the SPCA though.
She doesn't. She finds her own stuff.
I guess I do.
That's why I don't want to limit people to not be able to track. Because
Well, if they trap and they don't take it to the SPCA, then no one knows and no one cares, and we don't get charged for it. They just sign homes for it,
Right.
right? So it's not like she couldn't continue catching cats.
Well, it'd be interesting. I think what you want to do, Tia Marie, would be look at the SPCA bills. I don't know if they designate the animals, whether they're dogs or cats, but it'd be interesting to see what your charges are for cats to sort of see if that's the issue.
But this one allowing people to track based on this.
If I'm remembering correctly, the bills do say the type of animal that was collected.
Okay, that's a good start.
So let's just talk about the bill. So if I looked at the sheet you provided, Chris, it was, if I exclude the actual contract, two amounts, which I don't know why it was two, because there's like two numbers there. One.
So the first, 1688.26, I believe, is the annual fee.
Yeah.
The one before that was just for the 172.20 was for the collection for the animal control services, I believe.
Okay, and those two are annual costs, right? Because like in 22, they have the same two charges that increase 3%.
Yeah, the higher number, the 1688.26, and then the 1738.90, that's our annual contract payment that we pay in January, February each year.
Yeah, but with it, it's this other fee that's associated. It says on it annual contract as well.
I'll have to double check with Christine, but I believe that might have been a bill for the housing of stray animals, just because of the cost for it.
I'm changing my mind a little bit here and agreeing with Christina, because if you go back to section D, under that seizure and detention, the rest of that paragraph says the unauthorized trapping of stray feral cats for transportation to improved shelter shall not become the financial obligation to the township. And if it does, then the township reserves the right to pursue reimbursement from the person who took the cat or dog, whatever, to the SPCA. But to prohibit a resident from trapping an animal to then rehabilitate it and find a home for it. I mean, is that going too far to say that they can't do that? I think if we just say you can do that, but don't expect if you take it to the SPCA for us to hand over the bill.
But that's the point, is that they're not, the SPCA is not going to charge the person that's trapping them. They're trying to help the cat. And you can't really charge an owner because you don't, it probably doesn't have an owner. So the goal of the main goal is that if it is somebody's dog who they weren't, you know, I'm not saying that everybody that this dog runs away, it's their problem, sometimes it just happens. But if that occurs, it really should be whoever owns the dog that should be having to bear the expense of having the dog be, you know, brought to the SPCA and then brought back into your, but with a cat, with a situation with stray cats that don't really have an owner, the only person that's going to be paying for it is you.
I think Ash's point though is that the language kind of said you shall not do that, and her point is why do we need that first sentence? We're just saying
Exactly. I deleted the
we
first
would
sentence.
say in our ordinance we're not going to.
Well, because it's not how, what do we define as being unauthorized? If we don't have the first sentence, then it's not unauthorized.
I took out the word unauthorized. Take out the first sentence.
We're
and the
not
word
going to reference
unauthorized.
trapping or anything to do with grounds, but if you take a feral animal to the SPCA, you can't charge it to the township.
Well, under your contract they are. That's what I'm saying. Your SPCA contract is charging you for that. If the animals are coming from your municipality, they're charging you.
I know, what we're saying here is that the township shall not become the financial obligation of the township, and the township shall seek recoupment of any costs. So even if they do continue to charge us, we reserve the right now to.
But who are you going to charge?
Yeah.
In the case of cats, you're not. So what the whole point of D was to try to prevent somebody from collecting them and then taking them to the SPCA, and then you being charged with the SPCA for the fact that they collected these animals. So, see what I'm saying?
I do. I still think it's murky though.
Yeah, I do too. If you take out the word
I mean, if you find a
unauthorized.
cat, it may not be feral, you take it to the SPCA,
You're going to get charged.
the township will get charged.
You will get charged.
But if you know who the owner is, some cats have the chips or whatever else, like that.
Then the owner pays.
Yeah.
Then the owner's good.
Yeah,
This is also animal
Responsibility.
control. Like, this is also animal
That's
control.
my point.
So if we
That's my
don't
point.
have animal control, then we might have a problem with stray cats.
Exactly.
So for people in our township to feel that they can go and they can take a stray cat or a litter of kittens to the SPCA and that they'll be taken care of and they'll have homes, like, that's a good thing.
Maybe just need a little bit more information. So what I was saying on the costs, if we exclude those two annual contracts, I hear what you say about one of them might be just a straight fee. Total is $8,126 for 2021. So I presume that's kind of a typical amount. So I guess the question is, of that 8,000, is it 6,500 dogs and 1,500 cats? And, you know, what are we talking about in terms of scale of problem feral cats being charged as? I don't know, right?
Yeah.
So we need a little bit more information. So to the point of digging into the bills a little bit,
Yeah,
we need to talk to SPCA.
Yeah.
What I can do is I can pull the bills from 2021, because I believe that they put the type of the animals that were collected on the invoices. I can pull the bills from 2021 and 2022 and give a summary to the board.
That'd be good.
And also in 50.6, there's no enforcement if they don't pay. I don't wonder if you put language in
No,
there.
there is. 50.9 is the enforcement. So if they're not paying, then it's a violation and a penalty.
I'm just wondering if we can't give them their pet back until they pay.
So
I don't think you
No,
can do
we're
that.
going to keep the pets. Are they coming to your house, Henry?
I do not believe you can do that.
Listen, I'm a little confused between 50.5 and 50.6, because in 50.5 it talks about, hey, when the owner shows up, they can't have the animal back, because upon payment of the fees and all the reasonable expenses.
Well, 50.5 is they're going to the SPCA. You're recouping it from the place that has it.
Right.
So there you're paying the expenses to get it back. And they would make you do that. I mean, I think to the extent that the SPCA...
But what's the difference between an owner reclaiming it under 50.5 and an owner reclaiming it under 50.6? If the owner has to reclaim the animal, why don't they just pay the fee directly to the SPCA?
I think they do pay a fee to the SPCA, but I think you then also get charged. I think there's... That's what I'm saying. I think that there's...
Yeah, that's not right.
I think if my dog gets taken to the SPCA and they know through the chip that it's mine, they'll call me, I think.
go.
I'll go, probably have to pay a fee, but then you're also, because an animal, the service of taking my animal and protecting it until I can claim it is the fee that you're being incurred, that you're incurred. So there's 2 fees, yeah.
That's all on the owner.
And to Ashley's point, because I have to put it in context, West Namel is a very rural community, and animals is it's a problem. And their board is that's not our problem. We as a board, this is their policy decision. We as a board don't feel that the care of animals is something that we should be worrying about. They have like 1,700 residents. It's a very small community. Where you may feel that the care of animals, making sure animals have, it's a policy decision on what is your role. I mean, you under the Second Class Township Code have the right to take on that role if you choose to.
So let's talk about the philosophy. So is the board in general supportive of having an ordinance like this that, look, it has some teeth relative to stray animals and costs that we incur today through the SPCA? Are we in favor of moving forward with something to address it, like this ordinance, or are we happy with the status quo?
The only support you have is if they find the owner. And that's the only teeth you have is if you find the owner, you're getting money. Otherwise, it doesn't really mean anything.
Okay, let's poll. So are you in favor of trying to do something with an ordinance to both recoup fees and also give a little bit more fight to, hey,
Yes.
try to raise the game on people taking care of animals and
Yes.
not having wild animals? Yes, well,
Do we have any listing of how many feral animals we have?
well, Chris, get a little
Oh,
bit.
he's gonna do
You're
that.
gonna do all the data?
I'll look through the bills and see what types of animals have been collected. Now, when I did talk to Christine about this, I'm not going to paraphrase kind of what she said, but mostly what you're probably getting are strays that are picked up and brought to the SPCA, not so much runaways that are being returned to owners. So the amount that might be recouped might be limited, but something is better than nothing.
Right. We need to look at it. Like I said, the last meeting.
So you're in favor of having something like this? Robert, do you want to or not?
Yes.
Ashley?
Yes.
John?
Well, I think this ordinance, the way it's written, is rather broad. I think it needs to be more focused on just getting reimbursement to the township for any cost that would be associated with an owner of a pet. So I'm okay with that part of it, but I think the other parts of it are addressing problems I don't think we really have. So I'd like to have further discussion and some more information.
So can you point the board to where you feel it's overly broad?
I scaled it back significantly from what some of the other municipalities have done, so I would be interested in that too, John. Which ones are you? Because the intention is that, as Tina Marie said, it's really only when you can identify the owner. And again, I don't expect this to be this significant windfall, but if you can identify the owner, why not try to recoup that fee?
Yeah. I mean, if you can identify the owner.
It's their responsibility to take care of their pets.
And I think the other thing I'd really like to look at is, we are in a 5-year contract with the SPCA, and we're in year 4. So I'd like to take a look at the agreement we have with them too.
And we've done that on behalf of many municipalities. They are pretty solid in not changing the agreement. I mean, it's been something that multi-municipalities have looked at and tried to negotiate with them. They basically like take it or leave it. Find someone else to do it. I mean, I don't know if your experience has been that way, but we have looked at that agreement because the agreement, I've looked at it and I think it's not the best. It's vague, it's very one-sided, and I know on behalf of other municipalities, I've requested changes, and they basically say, sorry, we're the only place in town, take it or leave it.
What if you don't have an agreement?
Can I ask, what exactly do we get for that fee of, what, $1,700?
People in the township can take your animals to the SPCA. Residents of West Goshen have the ability, and the police have the ability to take the animals to the SPCA and say, here you go, take care of it.
At which point they'll charge us.
They charge you.
So we can take it to them, but then they get this, okay.
So if we don't have an agreement, they're actually going to deny people coming
Yes.
in and dropping cats off.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And not have anything.
Yeah.
So it sounds like that piece of the contract is fine. We have to have that.
But everything else that goes with it is part of their contract. They will not change. Yeah.
And this is what Kristen is describing is how I've dealt with the SPCA my entire career. There's no other place to go.
In the grand scheme of things, with no other place to go, for $1,700 a year, have the ability for people to, and everyone knows, find a stray or whatever else, take it to the the SPCA. It's just,
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with it, even if the language is
Yeah.
vague and iffy. So,
That's not the issue.
Chris and James have a question relative to the administrative burden of this ordinance was to come into effect in West Goshen and trying to recoup, I don't know, $3,000 of fees, because the rest of it, no one knows who the owner of the animal is. Is it something you feel is worth the effort or not?
To have this.
I mean, how easy is it for Christine to send a letter asking to collect money from the owner?
I think it would depend on the number of animals. I think in terms of whether or not it's something that's administratively burdensome is going to depend on the types of collections plus the number of animals. So if we're talking, based on reviewing the bills, it kind of ebbs and flows throughout the year. Because if you look at February, March, like the last 2 years, those have been the higher months, and then it kind of peters off a little bit. So I think it's going to really depend on what it is throughout the year.
So you need a little bit of time maybe to look at these bills,
Yes.
like we talked about, get a feel for the number of particular animals, what type, how many had owners that reclaim them, and then decide whether you feel this is something that would be administratively acceptable.
Yes.
Yeah, and also, can we get a copy of this contract we have with the SPCA so we can see what exactly we're dealing with?
Yeah, and it's not the $1,700 the annual bothers me, it's the other monthly cost that we're paying. That's why I brought it out. It was like, last month it was like $2,000.
Those monthly costs last month were,
It's like $1,700 or something. That's the part that
last month was, the last bill was $1,282.73.
That's
Now,
I think what it costs to board an animal, like a kennel or...
so the fees, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, it's a flat fee and the fees are prescribed in the agreement. Now, again, it depends on the number of animals within our jurisdiction that are dropped off there. So that's why I'm saying some months are higher than others, because like we had, the month before that was $644 in March.
That's the part that
But I was
bothers
trying to
me.
understand that if you have to kennel an animal because you're going away, and I'll make a number up, let's say it's $100. The SPCA is charging us $120. I mean, it sounds reasonable to me, but if it's 4 times the amount of the kennel cost...
No, it's much less than a kennel cost. Yeah, the cost is less.
Why would we want to argue and argue about fees or whatever else? It sounds to me like it's a reasonable cost, assuming that $1,700 represents 10 animals that month.
Again, it goes to a policy on whether you think that's something that a service that a municipality should be providing to its residents.
And I heard the board all agreed that we were interested in having that service. The only question is, to John's point, do we really want an ordinance? Do we really want the administrative burden of enforcing it, or do we just accept the cost of about $8-10 grand a year?
My question is, are people from other municipalities dropping animals off to that SPCA and we're?
No, but if the owner of the animal isn't from West Goshen, actually, I don't know if that's the case. I think if the person dropping the animal off is from West Goshen, I still think you get charged.
I think it depends on where the
If someone from East Goshen comes with a cat to the West Goshen SPCA, do we get charged?
It's not just the West Goshen SPCA, yeah, it's a regional SPCA.
Right,
So,
but do we get charged for it though? That's the question.
I do not believe so, because I think it's where the animal was
And they take their
Collected.
information and then.
yeah, I think it's from where their animal was collected, yeah.
Okay.
But if somebody in East Goshen picks up my dog, I don't live in West Goshen, but assume I did,
They're charged.
I would get, and I went to go get my dog, I'd be charged there.
And they know where you live, right, yeah. Well, that's what happened to me too. My daughter, or Jack Russell, ran away from the home, and we searched for hours. Unfortunately, the police picked the dog up, took it to the SPCA, and we were able to collect the dog. They charged us like $25. So I don't know, like, is there a further charge on top of that?
I
The
think,
township would be charged?
I think, depending on where the dog was found, do you know what township it was found in?
It was Strasburg, the flagship was in West Goshen.
So you probably were charged for that dog being dropped off there, yeah?
So the township was charged, and then we as the owner was also charged.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so this ordinance would then, that charge that was being charged to the township for the service of being able, for somebody to be able to bring that dog there is what this is trying to recoup.
So Chris, just so I'm clear, so if in this case you went and got your animal and paid the SPC $25, if this was in effect, you then get a bill in the mail for whatever the West Goshen Township is charged as
Yeah.
well. So you think you paid to pick your animal up,
Yeah.
done with it, and now you go home 2 days later, you get a bill, right? So.
But I love my dog, so I picked it.
But then you have a dog in an hour.
Just get our own.
How much is an hour?
And I made sure my dog could
This is
get
my
loose
point.
again.
Why don't you ask the SPCA to charge them the full amount instead of,
They won't. Under your under the way the contract is now, yeah.
That's the only.
And honestly, this is something I was talking to Wes Broughton about it, and Jack Hines, who's been in municipal, as the manager for 40 years and now as the supervisor, he said it's something that groups of municipalities need to come together to try to really revamp the contract. To the extent that it would never happen, I don't know, but that's one of his suggestions.
So, I would agree.
Right, I think it's a good idea. I know East Goshen had some issues with it, so they probably would be on board with that.
So what I would do for the board is if the board is interested in having this kind of ordinance, which it does sound like the board is interested in having, we can have Kristen prepare a draft for the board's review at the next meeting, and in the interim, I can look at the bills and provide a summary of the types of animals that were collected and try and provide a breakdown of the fees as well as a copy of the SPCA contract.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. How far back do you think you need to go to get a good picture
I would
of
just
the SPCA numbers?
I would just do 2021 and so far in 2022.
Okay, that's fine.
I would like to know, hopefully it's all explained in the contract, is it $25 when you pick up the dog and then how many days it's been there gets billed to the township kind of thing. I'd like to know what the actual specific impact is to an individual owner.
I can tell you from looking at, I've seen the contract we have, it looks exactly like every other SPCA contract I've dealt with.
It's a fixed income fee, right?
It's a fixed fee, it's not very detailed, and it's very poorly written.
Okay.
Can we see that?
Yeah, that was the action.
I want to see that poorly written. So we have a name.
Does anyone from the public like to make a comment on riveting discussion about animal control?
Do we all have our dog pictures on our phone right now? Right.
Apparently not. Okay. Is there anything else from the board? Chris has summarized the actions. Are we good? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Next on the agenda is item number 6. Proposal, discussion and possible approval of a proposal from Brickhouse Environmental to perform an environmental site assessment of a portion of the property owned by Stanbury West Goshen LLC. And Chris, you have your name on this agenda item.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The board previously had discussed as part of the Stanbury Land Development Plan potential acquisition of approximately an 11-acre site on the northern part of the property. During the discussion, there were some environmental concerns, and the purpose of accessing this property would be a potential improvement project for the Goose Creek watershed, potentially a flood hazard remediation project. So we contacted Brickhouse Environmental, had previously provided a proposal to the township to do some work related to that, specifically seeking assurances from 3 parties, the DEP, the Turner Lane Industrial Park General Partners, and ICI America, that the township would not be held liable for any response actions related to the property, that we could go forward with designing and maintaining a stormwater management facility on there without any restriction, and also to conduct any additional research, but not including any additional sampling of the site. So the proposal that was provided that's before the board has a consulting budget of $2,500. Kristen, and this updated proposal was based on a meeting that Jamie, Rick, Kristen, and I had with Paul White at Brickhouse Environmental. Okay. So the intent of this is to provide the board the assurances that we wouldn't be on the hook for any sort of remediation efforts, if any would be necessary. Okay. If the board decides to go forward with acquisition of the property.
Okay, so I had a couple of questions. Hopefully we can have answers to them. So just one comment first. The purpose of the acquisition, in addition to being able to potentially do a stormwater improvement project, I also believe the board was interested in the fact that the acquiring of this property on the township would prevent any possible future development on the northern tip of the parcel, because there is, although a lot of it is undevelopable, there's a portion of it that is developable.
That's correct.
If it wasn't, it is possible that could be developed in the future if it was not in the township's control. So I think it's a little bit more than the stormwater improvement project that could potentially happen. My first question really is, although I see the intention is to approach these three parties with, the request to get a written assurance that the township is not liable for any response actions, which I think is probably doable. I think a bigger ask, which I think is probably not likely, is for them to then say that we can go ahead, design, construct, and maintain a stormwater management facility on the lot without restriction to the groundwater plume. I think getting a written assurance on that, they may balk at that because they don't know what that means in terms of ground disturbance or anything else. We don't know what it means in terms of continuing change to groundwater on the site in terms of where it is and at what level. So I'm not sure that, although it's in the scope of what they're going to ask, I think that we need to talk about whether that's a realistic expectation that we would get those assurances. And if we don't get it, is it still acceptable to the board as long as we get assurances that any remediation is not our responsibility? So that's one question I have.
John, if I can interrupt for a second. I think
Sure.
what he's trying to provide to us is, because we said to him, there were, in the discussion, there were board members that thought, to your first point, even if we can never do anything with it but just protect it from being developed, we have an interest in acquiring it. And if that was the case, that's all you wanted to do, there's probably he was pretty clear to us, and Jamie and Chris tell me if I'm wrong on this, you don't have to do any more investigation, you don't have to get any assurances from anybody. It's clear who the contaminating party is, and DEP has them on the hook for the remediation. So if you're just taking the land, you're not going to be held liable. But the next step to evaluate whether, if and when you ever want to do something as far as a flood mitigation problem, stormwater management project, he would be looking into what could your potential liability be, and is there a way, before you would even start to design a project like that, to have something, it's mainly from the DEP, really, to give you that legal protection and have an agreement in place with the DEP to say, okay, if you did that, yeah, you would be able to do that and not be held liable for any impacts that it would have specific to the same contaminant that they've already identified.
Right. But we already have a consent order, which is protection also, not us. I mean, there is a consent order out there showing that the responsible party and that they're required to remediate.
Right, but what he was saying is that if you were to take title to this land and start to dig and move things around, you then could affect downstream by taking, and again, he said, based on his reading of the phase 1 and phase 2s,
right,
that he's not even certain that the contaminants are on that 10 acres. That's not even been identified. And if it is,
it's gone about 150 feet from the property. The closest well is about 150 feet north of the property. It does have some TCE contamination in it. So it has not been further delineated at all. But as part of this, I think that we should be taking soil samples. I think as part of the study, I think if you're going to do it and you're going to further delineate, which is what you're doing. And the second part right here? No, the soil samples are not going to be taken. It's very clear. It's not part of this. And I think we need to know that from the standpoint if we do want to do some type of stormwater.
well, how do you know? Because it says to conduct additional research into the extent of the plume in relation to lot C. So maybe that's what he.
I asked
Paul.
Paul.
So I have something
They're
to
not
sort of
there.
interject here because this is relevant to what we're talking about. I did speak with Martin Honkey at Washington University. He and his class got the data from ICI and DEP, and they're making a project out of it. I'm actually going to go see, you're doing that this week, I'm going to go see them on Thursday, see what they came up with. But they're also soil scientists. So one of my things that I would really like to do is for us to collaborate more with the university. He is a licensed hydrogeologist, and I think that if we were to give a soil sampling project to the university, it would be free for us. And we're really going to engage the students. If you guys are interested, if you want to pursue that route, that is one option.
Yeah, I would never enter any type of agreement without a soil sample. Any type of agreement.
When I agree to any agreement, the decision for the board is we want to acquire a property, to Kristen's point. If we never touch it, there's no way we're liable
samples.
So right now, why would we do anything if we had a project that we wanted to actually do on the property? Why would we spend $2,500 on a study that we're maybe years away from doing any work on it? Why don't we just acquire the property, prevent any development in the open tip? And when the time is right, when Rick has defined a stormwater project that meets some future permit benefit, then we would spend some money on sampling, whatever else was required at the time.
So maybe too late.
It's not too
It
late.
may be, no, because your groundwater is very shallow there. You want to do something with stormwater remediation, you don't want that TCE traveling down the creek. So you don't even know if it's feasible to do a stormwater until we take soil samples to know our current conditions.
So why would we take samples years in advance of doing the project?
We need
But
to
it's
know what
not
we're
effective.
getting
You're going to
into.
spend money now and spend it all again right before you start the project.
Yeah, that's what you
So,
do.
no, I'm saying I don't need to spend anything. I just want the property and I want to sit on it and I want to start development on it. When the time is right, then we would spend money if we have a viable project to put in.
You may not have a viable
Or we may not. Or we won't spend any money.
Hold on, are you saying that you don't want to do this first?
Because
part here?
what Kristen just said to me tonight, I don't want to do anything right now, in my opinion, because we can buy the property. The liability absolutely rests with the responsible party. DP will be clear about that. We don't touch it in the meantime. We own it. No one can develop it. And when we're ready to do a project, and we know what that looks like and where it's going to be, then we would spend money to say, we want assurances when we do this work, DP, that we won't be on the hook for anything that changes. And we'll do the sampling at that time.
Well, then you wipe out the possibility of having to do any stormwater remediation there because you don't know what that answer is. So you buy the property now, just so individually will go. Forget about the stormwater because you don't know that answer right now. So you can't even put that on your agenda as a goal for that property.
That's right.
So you want to take that risk.
Why spend the money now?
When we do that, we would do this.
But it's too late.
It's not too late. What happens between, we own it, we're ready in 4 years' time to do a project, and we say, Brick House, we want you to do some sampling, and we want you to get the written assurance from DP that we can do it. If we can't get it, we can't do the project.
Right, so then you just buy the
But
property.
we own the property, no one's developing it.
With TCE, you're not going to have a whole lot of change. It's a settler, you're not going to have
Now,
a lot of change.
can I ask you a question of clarification here? There is a consent agreement here in place that was signed back in March 25th, 2019. With almost 3 different parties here. If we become an owner, do we also become a fourth party here?
No.
So we'll actually, we already have an identification.
Exactly.
Is that correct?
We don't have an identification, but you would not, under the law, be held liable if, as I said earlier, you just acquire the property and do nothing. DEP has already identified who the parties are that are responsible for the contamination and are responsible for the cleanup.
So why do we need Brick House to get written?
Only if you, in the future, wanted to do something. So I guess the question I wrote down from Sean's point of view is, we need to ask Brick House, is there any downside in completely waiting until if and when somebody decides to do a project there? I don't know the answer to that. I just don't practice in environmental law to be able to give that answer.
I think that's an important question to get the answer to.
Yeah. And if the answer is no, there's no downside, and that you can wait until a project, maybe you won't even develop a project, and maybe you'll decide that's not the right place to do it. But I don't know if there's any benefit to doing it now, even before you acquire it.
Even if the answer to that, it depends. It doesn't stop us moving forward with acquiring the property. Because if the answer is, yes, you should do something now because of X, Y, and Z, then okay, maybe we'll do it. If the answer is, well, you can wait, because the decision to acquire the property is independent of doing any stormwater work on it.
Yeah, so let's not spend the money now.
I don't even know what we're going to get for $2,500. We're going to get written assurance, which we already have.
Yeah, no, I think the written assurance is is for you to take further steps.
You're going to get
He was trying to analyze whether or not and describe to the DEP what maybe you would be doing in the future. And if you were to be doing that, what potential liability there could be. And to the extent there was, could you get protection now or some sort of an agreement from DEP? That's what he was seeking.
What we're going to get from DP is it depends.
You probably.
It depends on what you're going to do,
Yeah.
how much earth you're moving, and where it is, and it says here the initial consulting budget. So the answer will be, when you're ready to do it, we'll come in and do another specific piece of work.
I agree. I don't
Because money will be
think
spent.
you need to spend this money at all. I agree. You
You
don't,
agree
you don't
now?
even have.
Okay,
No,
so-
from the beginning, I
Put it
agree
away.
with that.
But you
But
agree
I
for us
do
not to spend
think-
the money, but you also agree though for us to take ownership of the property.
Yeah, because that's something we do need to let Stanberry know
Yes.
sooner rather than
I
later, because
think
they're working on a
that-
subdivision plan.
But I don't think we need this study, but I do think we need soil samples. That's all we need.
I disagree. There's no reason to
Well,
take
I
soil
don't think we need to
samples.
go through a brick house to get that.
No, no.
So I think that if we want, you can join me and we can talk to Martin and see if that's something the university wants to do for us.
That's all we need. This study is not needed.
So where do we
right
get
now.
the soil samples on the Stanbury property?
They may already
When we
know.
own it.
No,
So
I think we have
I'm
to
just
wait
trying to
until
understand, you want us to take samples before we own it, or are you saying we can wait until we own the property and then take samples? So I don't see why you
depends
do
on
it
what your
like
goals
that.
are. What are your goals for the property?
To own it and have it not developed, that's the immediate goal.
What's your
Open
long-term
space.
goal?
Well, to goal is maybe down the road, if we
May not
can
be
afford
possible.
it, we'll do a stormwater project.
May not be
Well,
possible.
then maybe it won't,
But
but
if
what's
it's
the
not
cost of us
possible-
not buying it? We're getting it donated to us.
Yeah, if it's not possible, at least it's not going to be developed on.
I think really the issue before the board is whether or not we should take ownership and what that liability that may possibly mean to the township.
None whatsoever, to
That's
just
the
take
question.
ownership.
Now, if that's the issue, then why not take the property and then we can decide in the future what we're gonna do with it, if we can do it.
I agree. You don't have any goals for the property other than not have it developed right now. That's what you have to do.
So, just based on the I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. So based on the,
Please do interrupt.
Please.
based on the discussion with the board, here's what or amongst the board, here's what I think our action items are. I think Kristen and I should go back to Paul White at Brickhouse regarding the question about waiting to get protection from DEP and getting some sort of
Or just understanding if there's any
Understanding.
downside and just completely waiting until a project comes to fruition. If there's no downside in waiting, then it sounds like the board's ready just to wait. But the other thing I want him to do is, because he said this to me in 2 conversations now, is what I just said to you, John. There's no liability for the township to just take ownership. I want, and it's somebody who understands environmental law and who's reviewed the consent orders, to put that in writing that you can rely upon that.
Yeah, and I think we get that from Paul, that'll give the board some more assurances.
Yeah.
In terms of the soil sampling, since Ms. Gagne has a contact, that she's put us in touch with at the university, we can reach out to the owner of the property currently, see if they would allow us to access the property to do soil sampling through the university. If not, we can wait until the township takes ownership of the property and then do it at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, but I think we can talk about the sampling and how to control it and all, but I want to go into the creek area, and it is protected land, so we need to talk about
I
that.
think you should talk to Martin if you would like to talk to about it.
I don't really necessarily want a sample on the property. I want a sample on the 10.4 acres, whatever it is, on that piece of property.
Yeah.
Is that feasible? I don't care if it's on their property, I'm not
No, that's what we're talking
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. You're just talking about your
And
property.
what we can do is we can provide the approved plan for Stanberry and just like hatch off the area in question.
And then we need to talk to see if that's, a viable option to even take samples in a protected wetland area. I'm not even sure if that's an option. That's what we need to do.
Okay, is there any public comment on what you've just heard?
I've got to say something. It just scares me to death that you're going to take possession of contaminated.
It's not contaminated. That's the 10 acres. That's what he's telling them is not contaminated.
What's the consent order for?
For the property upstream.
Okay.
ICI America, which is operating.
So the
in
10 acres has not been,
I don't know. I don't know.
The nearest, to Tina's point, the nearest monitoring well is not on the property, and the way they've drawn the plume, it shows that the groundwater contamination shows a bit of the plume under the 10 acres. But until it's sampled or whatever else, you wouldn't really know whether that was true.
And we don't even know if we can
And
sample.
it doesn't matter if it's there because it's the responsibility of the identified party per PAPP and their consent.
now also that we've set precedent in doing stormwater projects on private land, my thought would be if this stormwater project comes to fruition in 4 or 5 years and it's still owned by the new Aldi site or whoever is going to own, who's buying that Stanberry, would they not just allow us on their property to do that stormwater project?
Well, if they're going to donate it for nothing and it stops more development on the top couple of acres, so it's no longer 10, it's down to 8 because someone says, I can put something in there and preserve it to help the watershed in general, and then we decide, we don't have to get easements or anything else, it'd be our property. It'd just be so much easier to execute a stormwater project.
So that portion that you're talking about, 2 acres or whatever, that would still be,
There's 10 acres in total, but there's a couple of acres at the top that are not in the wetlands that could be developed.
but it would have to be by the current owners, Stanberry, and you've already approved the
They could
project.
subdivide the property, parcel off the 2 acres at the top, and sell it to someone to build a warehouse.
And it's accessible? I thought there
I don't
was
know.
kind of landlocked area that, I thought I remembered discussion that
It
wasn't.
might be. But
And from an environmental standpoint, Stanbury would not want somebody coming on their property from a legal liability standpoint to do work. That's not going to happen. So the only way to do it is to take it.
it is landlocked, Margie, we could sell it to the people who own the 3 properties that are above that northern end. They might take further space.
Still scared to take that.
Doug, you have a question?
Yeah.
Doug White, West Goshen Township. When this first came up in 2019, I did oppose the township taking that property because I thought just owning it would be a cost, maintaining open space and all that. But Christian, you're saying there's going to be no cost to the township to just own this property? We don't have to go mow or anything like that?
I mean, I didn't say that. I said there'd be no liability from an environmental standpoint. I didn't mention maintenance, but I don't think there's much to do there.
If it's a wooded lot,
Yeah, there's not going to be any mowing.
there's probably not a lot.
Okay, so owning, by the way, I agree with not doing the study and waiting, and that's good. But, so owning this, just owning it, there doesn't have to be a cost then. We don't have to send Doreen out there to mow or no, I don't know.
We're getting the property for free,
Yeah.
essentially free. It is wetlands and a wooded area that's
Right.
sitting there, not maintained at all.
Okay.
People are gonna go back there, trails are gonna be back there. There's 2 acres of the property that could be developed if we do not take ownership of the property.
Right.
So we don't want that to happen, so we wanna own the property. And also, it's a very important part of Goose Creek, which feeds into the rest of Goose Creek that
Right.
leads all the flooding down Montgomery Avenue we hear about all the time. So this would lead to an opportunity to improve that moving forward. I see 0 problems with taking
Okay.
this ownership.
As long
And
as-
now that we have this protection of knowing that the plume is ICI's
Right.
responsibility. It does not rest on us. We're in the clear, and now nothing can be developed.
Okay, thanks.
Positive for
All right. Any other questions? All right, so we've got our actions there, Chris. I think you just summarized them with Kristen, so we're good. All right. So we'll move on to agenda item number 7, discussion and possible approval of resolution number 8, 2022, declaring the week of May the 15th to May the 21st as a National Public Works Week. So I'll be happy to do that. So per the note from Chris, we've got before the board this resolution to designate the week of May 15th through May 21st as a National Public Works Week. So let me read the key aspects of the resolution. So whereas public works professionals focus on infrastructure, facilities and services that are of vital importance to sustainable and resilient communities and to the public health, high quality of life and well-being of the people of West Goshen Township. And whereas these infrastructure, facilities and services could not be provided without the dedicated efforts of public works professionals, your engineers, managers and employees at all levels of local government and the private sector who are responsible for rebuilding, improving and protecting our nation's transportation, water supply, water treatment and solid waste systems, public buildings and other structures and facilities essential for our citizens. And whereas it is in the public interest for the citizens, civic leaders and children in West Goshen Township to gain knowledge of and to maintain an ongoing interest and understanding of the importance of public works and public works programs in their respective communities. And whereas the year 2022 marks the 62nd annual National Public Works Week, sponsored by the American Public Works Association and the Canadian Public Works Association. Therefore, be it resolved, we do hereby designate this week, May 15th through the 21st, as National Public Works Week and urge all citizens to join with representatives of the American Public Works Association and government agencies in activities, events and ceremonies designed to pay tribute to our public works professionals, engineers, managers and employees, and to recognize the substantial contributions they make to protecting our national health, safety and quality of life.
And Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to adopt this.
Thank you. John, is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Rob.
I just wanted to add something on the third, whereas decide if it's important or not. Where it says leaders and children of West Goshen to gain knowledge of and to maintain an ongoing interest, I put respect and understanding. If you need the word respect, it's going after the word interest.
That's fine with me.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's don't change it.
Put that in. When we do respect them, a tremendous amount of effort and work they do. So, Woody, thank you for you and the team.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Any public comments on the resolution?
I just want to say I stopped out today and saw a public works crew working on the stormwater project out there on Loxley Drive, and they're out there digging away with that excavator, and all the folks are out there putting in that 4-foot diameter pipe to replace the galvanized or the CMP that was deteriorated. So it's good to see our township employees at work.
All right. So ready to take a vote? I'm sorry, Steve.
Can I make a suggestion that
Sure.
maybe the township find in the budget a few dollars to buy the lunch during our public works week? Or something nice for them?
Yes.
Chris, that sounds good. You should recognize
Sounds good to
it.
me. Thank you. Dave, just tell me what the guys are like.
Barbecue sandwiches.
Pizza on Friday.
Okay.
Whatever we do decide, I'd like to be present when that, whatever date we decide and join.
Very good. So we're ready to take a vote and approve the resolution. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Okay. Resolution passes 5-0. Thanks, Dave. Agenda item number 8, discussion of applications coming before the zoning hearing board. Jamie.
Thank you. We do have an application that will be before the hearing board on May 23rd. This is an application to reinstate the relief that was previously granted by the zoning hearing board on October 30th of 2018. The approval was so the approval expired. The approval was for dimensional variance in order to allow 12-foot building setback along the property's frontage on Beaches Road. We can't say that road. Beaches? There we go. And an 8-foot setback along Old Westtown Road. This relief was sought in order to allow for the construction onto it an existing office building. The board also did grant a waiver of land development for this property on March 15th of 2022 that was, hinged on this, conditioned on seeking this extension from the zoning hearing board, and that is now coming before the board in May. That's all I have.
Thanks, Jay. Any questions about this?
I just like to explain, March 15th at our board meeting, we granted them that waiver of land development. It basically reinstated the approval that was expired. Why do we have to go through this again? Why do we have to?
It's two different approvals. They needed relief from the zoning hearing board, which had expired under our ordinance after a year, so they needed to get that reinstated.
So we did that on March 15th.
No, you didn't do that. That's a zoning hearing board decision.
So now I need to go back to
You waived the requirement for them to do land development for what they're proposing to do.
Right.
But the zoning relief that gave them the relief they needed to do the project had expired. So they need zoning, and then go back and reaffirm the zoning relief, and then they came to you and said, and if we get that, can we not have to go through land development because the nature of what we're doing is so small? And you granted that waiver, conditioned upon them, the zoning hearing board reinstating or reapproving the approval.
Yeah, basically an extension.
It's two different
because
bodies.
it expired.
So does this go before the zoning board again?
It does, but it's only basically an extension of the relief that's already been granted. So they're not.
I mean, it's
just because it was expired.
The one thing we had a conversation about this, that there's nothing really your ordinance, as many zoning ordinances, say that you have to act upon your zoning approval within a certain time frame when it expires.
In here, it's 6 months, which is a rather short amount.
One year.
We extended that to 1
You
year.
did, okay.
Yeah. But the problem is that a lot of this happens a lot. People, for whatever reason, life happens, pandemics happen, expenses occur, they can't get to act upon the relief in a timely manner. And then they say, well, what do we need to do? Unfortunately, there's nothing really that gives them to just say to the zoning hearing board, yeah, just extend it. You have to go back to the hearing process. The hearings will probably testify and say, nothing's changed, this project's the same, ordinance hasn't changed, please reapprove it. And that's probably what will happen.
And I believe it's the same members on the board that were on the board in 2018 when this was approved. I don't think the membership has changed. Okay. So they should be familiar with this. So I don't believe that there's, and Jamie, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe there's any action required by the board.
No, there's not.
Yeah.
This is just to inform you that that's the application coming up for the zoning hearing board.
They don't have any other applications that meeting, do they?
We will not have any other applications in that.
Okay, thank you, James.
That's right.
And just so the board is aware, as noted on the memo, Jamie's been working very hard to kind of restructure some of our procedures related to zoning hearing board applications. So on the first meeting of the month, we will bring any applications that are going to be heard at the end of the month to the board.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Okay, agenda item number 9, discussion and possible approval of the following TE 160 applications for the PA Department of Transportation. Chris.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So before the board this evening are 3 TE 160 applications from the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation. I'll review each one individually, and I think the board should make separate motions for each one of these. So the first one would actually be a new traffic signal at the Westchester Pike at the US 202 southbound off-ramp. So PennDOT's seeking to install signal at this location due to the number of reported crashes and clusters at this location. I did ask our police department to look back at the activity from 2019 to 2022, and there were 8 reportable collisions at this location during that time period. And this is part of PennDOT's Westchester Pike corridor project, and they are anticipating that this could reduce the number of crashes and improve the traffic movements at this location. Dave, Rick, Mark, and I met with PennDOT back in March, and we do support this application. The township would, as with any traffic signal, the township would have to own, operate, and maintain it, but PennDOT would do the installation.
Yeah, PennDOT's going to pick up the tab for the installation.
So this is, as you're coming south on 202, you've got that curve off, and you come down and sort of right yield onto eastbound Route 3, and there's a spot for the westbound turn, right?
Yeah.
So the traffic light will do both, like it'll be a spot for the eastbound traffic as well as the westbound?
For the west side of 202, on Route 3 to the west side of 202, at that closure.
Yeah.
That's where you'll get the signals.
Right where the storage is of the materials?
On the other side of 202.
Yeah, so this would be like if you're coming...
Northbound? Yeah, that would be.
No, it's the southbound off-ramp.
Southbound off-ramp.
So you're heading
down. We call it on the screen.
So you're heading west on Route 3, that's where the lights come in, right by the 202 south and Route 3 west heading.
In front of where the
When you come
Wawa
off
used
the
to be?
ramp, you're at the CDS and the Wawa on Washington.
No, on the other side.
That's northbound.
That's southbound.
That's north.
Northbound is the CVS side.
That's southbound.
That's going east and west, that's west.
Keep the both
It's southbound 202.
Southbound
202, but
Off
then
the ramp, you go east and west.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, off the ramp south and east and west.
So I do have a question about this. My neighborhood, which you know where I live, the people in my neighborhood have been asking for a light.
Right there at South Concord.
Well, yeah, at South Concord.
Yes.
You know.
Yes.
At South Concord forever.
And you have 2 ball fields there.
How is the traffic going to affect up and down Route 3, which can get...
All the signals on Route 3 have the new computerized system that they talk to each other.
Mm-hmm.
So it will improve the flow on Route 3.
You think it will improve it?
Yeah.
Because when people come out of Westchester, after they get past that light at Westtown Road, they fly until they
You
get
don't,
off.
and you don't have enough, there's not enough traffic coming out South Concord to ever warrant a traffic signal.
Yeah.
there is enough traffic at that ramp.
Right, do you think that though this will improve their situation of the people living in that like the neighborhoods around there? Or do you think it'll add to
A chapter.
Before you get to that.
Well, South Concord's going to be right at the intersection, basically.
Yeah.
Very.
It should give you a break in that traffic.
Yeah.
You think it will give a break in the traffic?
Because isn't the traffic coming out of 202 that you're stopping?
Coming going west on Route 3 through into the borough.
Well, that's my question. Is the traffic going to stop that? Is it going to change that yield to a traffic stop for the eastbound coming up that ramp?
Okay, so I pulled up on Google, I pulled up the intersection. So here's Westchester Pike. My chair is sinking for some reason. So here's Westchester Pike, that's heading east, here's west. This is 202 south, so here's the ramp, and this is the direction that the chairman was discussing.
We haven't seen a design from PennDOT, but they should pull that over and control it all at the light.
Yeah, so both.
Where is the light?
The light would go here.
Yeah.
Oh.
So the ramp's gonna go away?
No.
We haven't seen a final
Just give you a
design.
light there at the ramp.
Where you're circling does not include the eastbound
They
yield.
did, years ago, they did the same thing right here, where you got off 202 and Bailey Pike.
Yeah.
There used to be a ramp that used to parallel the shopping center and come out with the yield. They took that away, so everything comes
Has
down
to go
to
to
the
light.
signal.
So they could they may decide to get rid of the ramp and just.
They may, and we haven't seen a final design.
We haven't seen a final
That's TBD,
design.
but that's where it's going to be. It's
Yeah.
the intersection.
So that
this is-
benefits the people trying to make a left on
Yeah,
the
it's
highway.
it's almost impossible.
I mean, it's
to
Yeah.
really bad right there.
I can tell you a number of years ago, I once made a left off that ramp, and I will never do it again.
Yeah, it's really, really difficult.
So would they, as of now, if that ramp stays, would they still be able to make a right at that light, traffic light also onto Route 3? If they don't want to take the ramp?
I would imagine if the ramp stayed, they would have, if they wanted to make a right onto 3, they would have to use the ramp. I don't think they would be able to make
Yeah,
a
they
right.
wouldn't, they wouldn't allow both of them.
So it's just for the left-hand turn heading west,
Correct.
basically?
So it would clean up this intersection. It would actually probably clean up, because I know I believe there's a flashing signal down here in North Concord, or South Concord, excuse me. I think it would help out with this whole area probably. Because I would imagine that they would synchronize the lights.
Yeah, but you also
Yeah,
have a
they'll
ramp
all
coming
be-
off 202, and if there's a red light there, I don't know. I'm not a traffic engineer.
Well,
I just-
we have the same thing here, we have the same thing at Blue Road. We actually have
Right.
cameras on the ramps.
Okay,
So once you get enough traffic on that ramp, it automatically gives a green light.
okay, so it's talking in the zones.
Now, the reason for this is because there's been a lot of accidents at this intersection, correct, over the years? So it really is a safety issue.
Yeah.
Are the accidents for people trying to turn left and getting sideswiped, or is it accidents with people not yielding properly and trying to merge?
I believe it's mostly the lefts on westbound Route 3, is that correct?
Or lefts coming off of 3 trying to turn on to it.
Yeah,
Yeah, left turn movements both ways there.
Exactly.
Right.
So in our meeting, Rick, Dave, Mark, and I had with PennDOT, we're very supportive of this application. We think it would help.
So there's gonna be like a green arrow to turn left on the 202?
For westbound traffic on 3.
On 3, yeah, there should be a turn movement.
Okay.
And you say PECO's going to be paying for all this?
PennDOT.
And PennDOT's actually going to make improvements to Spring Lane, where we put that temporary, it was $30,000-$40,000 for that temporary thing for the, so when you come out Spring Lane, you can't make a left. They're actually going to change that into a full concrete median. And then it goes all the way down with improvements all the way down and past the Boston Market.
And just for the record, what is a typical annual maintenance cost for a traffic signal like this? For our budget?
It's not really.
A few hundred, 1,000?
And Rick handles that, I'm gonna say 1,000, 1,500.
Per light like this?
But, we could, down the road, if you have a lightning strike, could take the controller out.
Yeah, but just regular.
But regular maintenance is minor because they're all LED bulb, so we don't have to go around and relamp them anymore. It's just an annual inspection, and
Yeah.
I have one more question, and that's related to a lot of pedestrians walk this street, and I know that people cross all the time. Is there any way that PennDOT wants to put in
They want to put a lot of pedestrian, that's
signals?
part of the whole project.
Really?
Yes.
It's really good.
Well,
No, there's no sidewalk.
if we wanted to do that project and put a signal in, ballpark with the new standards, 175,000 to over 200, and we're getting it, and that's expensive.
All right, someone willing to make a motion to approve this T160 application for Westchester Pike and US 202 southbound off-ramp?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Tina. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ashley.
Was that a reluctant
Just hope I didn't make my neighbors mad.
Yeah, go hear about it.
Is there any other board comments or questions? Is there any public comments or questions on this particular intersection? Okay, ready to take a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Motion passes 5-0. Chris, what's the next one?
So the next two are just upgrades of existing signals. The first is at the Westchester Pike bypass and Phoenixville Pike. So this would involve upgrades to the existing signal and involve the replacement of all the existing mast arms, relocating the detection equipment, the installation of a westbound left turn phase, updating the traffic signal heads, replacement of overhead signage, and the installation of pavement markings. And again, just like the previous one, PennDOT's going to do the work, and then the township will be responsible for maintaining this.
So my question on this one is, didn't they just upgrade this whole intersection as part of the Jirakian development?
But it's really
It's part of
bad.
Greystone.
And it
Huh?
really backs
It's
up.
part of Greystone. Greystone paid for it.
Greystone's paying for this.
No, Greystone paid for the last improvements. PennDOT's going to pick
So
up.
why didn't PennDOT at the time make this improvement when it was all just one project?
Mr. Chairman, as we have discussed in the past, we cannot predict the actions of state agencies.
Okay. Does anybody need to see this on the screen to know where it is or understand this intersection?
You know, so it gets really bad there at rush hour. So you're talking about a left-hand turn arrow going westbound on the bypass?
No, that just got, as part of Greystone, that got a turnaround. Yes.
Yeah, that should help. Goshen, over that traffic really backs up on the off ramp going north on 202, backs all the way up from that Phoenixville Pike. All of them was back all the way up to 202. So with the dedicated left-hand turn should help alleviate that.
It's not any dedicated lane, it's just a left turn
Yeah,
phase.
the lane's already there, it's just a dedicated turn function.
Yeah, it'll allow for the phase.
Good, yeah.
Okay.
Is there any way to cross-reference the application for Greystone and to ensure that that wasn't supposed to be part of?
It wasn't.
It wasn't.
Any board comments or questions on this one? No. You ready to make a motion?
I'll make the motion.
So the motion is to approve the TE160 application for the Westchester Pike bypass, State Route 322 and the Phoenixville Pike intersection.
I'll second.
Thank you, Tina. Is there any other board comments or questions? Any public comments or questions?
Can I just have one of the staff members maybe email the application for this improvement and the next improvement because they were just left out of that?
Okay, I'll clean up the packet on the website.
Okay, thank you.
I think, yeah, you had all three of the same one.
I apologize.
Baby Brandon.
Yes.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. We're ready to take a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Motion passes 5-0. Third application.
Mr. Chairman, the third application is relatively similar to the previous one that was discussed. This is an upgrade of an existing signal at the Westchester Pike bypass and North New Street. The project would involve replacing the east and westbound mast arms with new mast arms, installation of ground-mounted controller on the southeast corner, installation of radar dilemma zone detection, rewiring the intersection, new junction boxes, replacement of the north and southbound approaches, and installation of new overhead signage. As with the previous application, this is going to be work that's undertaken by PennDOT.
What does replacement of the north and southbound approaches mean?
They were going to widen for a turn.
Is that left turn onto North New is, there's not much room for someone, and a lot of people try to squeeze past the speed there.
Yeah, there's going to be turn lanes both directions.
Okay, so this is a road change as well then?
Yeah. That's an actual widening. Right?
The previous one we just did was not any change to the road. This one is including widening. And there's...
It says PennDOT safety. PennDOT safety, yeah, it is. It's PennDOT safety project.
That makes sense, all right. Any other questions from the board on this particular location?
I'd just like to ask a general question. Who drives these TE 160 applications? Is this something that the township has approached the PennDOT with, saying we would like to have these improvements and here's the data to support it? Or, can you?
Not only, we did last year on the Boot Road project, we approached PennDOT about that.
Right.
But these three projects, PennDOT has approached us.
Really?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's us, sometimes it's PennDOT. Depends on the situation.
I just wonder what drives PennDOT to come to us, being willing to spend this money in our township.
It's safety improvements.
And the township needs to sign off on them, since we're going to be the ones who maintain the infrastructure when it's done.
My name's Lori Davis. I live on Luke's Drive, and I've been in communication with a couple people at PennDOT over the last 2 or 3 years. This was actually supposed to be done last year, and I got bumped because of the number of accidents on that road. They actually started their own study, which I think was done through the township here or something. There was some communication with Mr. Craig. And this is when this whole plan was put out, where there'd be a dedicated turn lane, turning left if you're coming westbound or eastbound. So 2 left turn lanes have to be dedicated, because that road is a accident waiting to happen if you're trying to make a left on New Street either way. They're also adding a 5-foot, I don't know the technical term, but they call it a bike berm there. It's not a bike lane, but access for, if you go to their website and pull it up, you'll see their lingo. But it's going to be a pretty massive change in the road there. And the one thing I wanted to mention was there's 3 drainage outlets down on that 322. The runoff from U Street coming down from the borough when it rains hard, all the gravel, dirt, all ends up in that area. And I don't know who's responsible for that drainage. Is it?
They're PennDOT drains.
Oh, they are. Okay, so I would imagine they'll be improving them as well.
I would hope. Well, again, we haven't seen any plans.
Okay. I was going to say, on their website is a description of what their plan is.
Is there a diagram or just description?
Yeah, I think they have it all pretty much set to go. I think it was March next year is what the schedule date is.
We met with them over a year ago, and they weren't at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, all the way down to the on-ramp. The corkscrew, they're taking it from where it's 2 lanes, right? Down
Which one are you on now? What, you on this one?
Yep, on North.
Still on North New?
Bypass and North New.
Yeah, so if
So
you
what
were on the
corkscrew?
street,
So
you
you're
made a
talking
right.
about on North New, that piece there?
Yeah.
The corkscrew that comes off of 100 Potsdam Pike. So they're going to take the second lane. There's a part from the traffic light to the on-ramp on the bypass. There's 2 lanes, and that there's a lot of drive racing that happens right there. So they're going to actually take one of those lanes down, and it's going to just be single lane.
Oh, because there's a ramp and then 2 lanes
Right.
and 1 lane again.
Right.
So you're saying they're going to just...
And there's a section where the 2 lanes,
Yeah, it's bound.
they race down that road constantly. So they're going to
They have
go
to
to
run
1
that
lane.
by West Goshen Township. They've,
What's that?
the plans, that they have to run it by West Goshen Township. They just do
State
the rest
road.
day, and if you don't like it, just do that.
It's state road, and it's their
So we have timing on this, what is expected to be done?
I think the website said it was supposed to start in March and it was a 5 or 6 month project
March of 23.
for next year.
Yeah, well, thank you for that information. Thank you.
Well,
I mean, did you, have you been in contact with PennDOT?
I have that, because my house, literally, I'm the first one involved for every accident at that corner.
Right.
It's horrendous.
So you've been talking to PennDOT about the problem there over the years? Or?
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe you're the initiator for that
Yeah.
particular.
Well,
Squeaky wheel.
So it's your fault, is that the?
well, actually, I'll be happy for this construction to happen.
Yeah,
It's a big
sure.
thing, I think.
Good deal.
You should be happy to take the blame too, because that's a compliment.
Okay, so we haven't had a motion yet for this one, right? Or have we?
We have not had a motion.
Okay. So I'll make the motion to approve T 160 application for the Westchester Pipeline bypass State Route 322 and North New Street intersection.
And then I'll second.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from the board or the public?
Do
Steve?
these include pedestrian crossings, I assume, as well, future sidewalks?
Usually all the new signals have that.
Yeah.
There's a sign at our intersection that says no pedestrian.
They
crossing.
don't, it's about impossible to get a signal approved now that that's on.
So you think that might go away?
Yeah, Fern Hill, when we put that signal in Fern Hill, in fact, there's one section with an ADA ramp, and one section, 1 4x4 block of concrete to a bush.
Yeah, pretty much every intersection improvement requires pedestrian phase.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Get ready to take a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. All approved say nay. The motion passes 5-0. That's it for agenda item number 9. So next is agenda item number 10. Approval of the bills to be paid for the general fund, the sewer revenue fund, the waste and recycling fund, and the capital reserve fund. Are there any board questions about the bills to be paid?
I had a few, I think I know what the answer is, but I just want to confirm them. On page 1, there's tickets for Dorney Park. I'm assuming that's for the summer camp program?
Yes.
Okay. And there's a couple of the backhoe rental. I'm assuming that's because ours, either size was not correct or...
No, we bring another machine in for the winter.
Oh, a separate back for the whole winter or just for a certain...
No, we bring it in usually for the running yards do seasonal specials. So we'll pick it up for the winter season.
And use it all winter?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, and then I'm assuming that the sludge hauling, that was from the sewer plant?
Yes.
Okay, because there's a couple of them, I think, too. Okay. There's a couple of sludge removers. Okay, that's all I had.
Chris, I just have one question, but I can follow up with Lisa or Christine related to the applied waste services, the $2,245 cost for the single stream recycling. So I presume that's against the budget item that has the recycling, rejection, or fee
Yes.
budget line. I presume that's just part of that cost.
Yes, for the processing costs, yes.
So when we do our mid-year budget review, I'm curious as to where we are with general costs for recycling, rejects, or value for the stream, given general changing in pricing of everything. That's just a comment. Any other questions or comments from the board?
Do we know when the community park sign is going to come in?
It's ordered.
Summer, maybe?
Now, late summer, early fall, maybe.
Okay.
Is there a date? Did they give you a date at all, or just a TBD?
No, TBD. The sign out front, no message board, that took 18 months.
Oh my gosh, okay. So what is it going to look like?
Two stone pillars. Similar to what's up there, there's 4 pillars now. It's going to go down to 2 stone pillars. Sign at the top says West Goshen Community Park, and then a message board.
I believe this one's going to be digital.
Yes.
Yeah.
Cool.
So how many years would it take them to get it digital?
So we're still going to keep the old manual activities happening in the township here?
That was supposed to come down when that one went up. That one's about ready to fall over.
Because if people kind of go by this road and see the activities more than they're going 5 Ponds Road, the community park.
That was a long discussion, and that was the approved sum.
That wasn't around then.
We talked about digital ways to find information, trying to get people to use our social media and our website. That's where we have spending the money and effort to try to make that a viable way that people actively, easily engage with what's going on in the township from home without having to drive past the building. So that was why we said we don't need to spend money on another block of signs. So. Okay, are there any questions on the bills to be paid from, let's see, where are we? I haven't even had a motion. So I'll make a motion to pay the bills that are in front of us tonight. Is there a second? Thank you, Robin. Are there any other questions or comments from the board or from the public?
Just a clarification for the 109 for the Caterpillar excavator. Was that the final cost for that? What did we get for a trade-in value for the old one?
Top of my head, 53.
Right. So the 109, was that the sticker price for the excavator?
I have to have it.
Okay. Because I remember I think we had budgeted 125 for that, but then we're getting 50 grand back for a trade-in value, so the total cost would have been much lower than the sticker value. And you don't know what those numbers are, we don't think?
Not off the top of my head.
Right.
Okay, so there's an action there, Chris, to share that with the board. Both what was budgeted and what the actual outcome was. So, any public comments or questions? Steve?
Next supervisors meeting is supposed to be on the 17th, election day. Is that still?
So let's deal with the bills, and then we'll come to public comment, and we'll try to answer that question, okay? So anything else on the bills to be paid in terms of question? Okay, ready to take a vote? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Motion passes 5-0. So last item on the agenda is public comment. So Steve, you raised the question around the fact that the next scheduled board meeting falls on May the 17th, which is the primary day in which the township buildings used for voting. So the board's discussed with Chris either cancelling or rescheduling that meeting. So is there any update on what's coming down the pike that we would need to have a meeting? Or
as far as I'm aware, there would only be one item that would be before the board. At this juncture, I think that it would be safe to cancel your second meeting in May and shift everything to your first meeting in June.
Okay. Board okay with that?
Yeah.
But I can follow up with the board via email, and then we can make the appropriate announcement on the website and on the township building.
We just agreed out, we need us to vote.
Let's see if something comes up, and I can tell I don't think you don't need a vote to cancel the meeting.
Very good. So no, there won't be a second meeting at this point, unless something comes up. So check the website and the social media and make sure you're well informed. Are there any other public comments or questions tonight? Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? I'll second it. All in favor of adjournment say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. We're adjourned.
We started marking everywhere you guys want to send the slide.
I'm sorry, but
This is from the payment marking contract. We can forward it. I'm not going to give you guys a resolution, we can act respective, and I'm going to send
I figured they were responsible, they sent it in right away.
No, we were planning on the board. I was going through the same thing this year.
Then how did you finally get it?